Hello everybody, Thetimix here, back with more of Let's Play the Factorio Way. And I've titled this episode, But Wait, There's More Fun with Combinators. Or just more Combinators. Because I didn't actually intend, when I started out this particular session, of course another 2 hours of gameplay, to make a bunch more Combinators. And I didn't make as many this time, but I ended up doing more of that than I expected. Here's what I did first, though. This is the Bobmonium area in the northwest of the base, and we need more tin for everything that's going to come forward. More advanced electronic stuff, well, not advanced, basic electronic boards, the third tier. We're going to need a lot more of that stuff, more wires for the circuit network. All of that is going to be needed in the near future as I continue to work towards finishing up things I need to do before I do a proper minibus. So I had to really expand the tin area to do that efficiently. So we did this. And if we look at our mini-map, yay, pollution. Let's turn that off for a second. Extended the coal line from where it was up here. This is the ore sorter where I got the glass for the greenhouse some time ago. And this is where the coal line ended, so it extended all the way up here. And we've got all of, the electric poles going up there. Now, if we take a look at our power usage, I like to look at these on hourlies. A couple interesting things. One is that you can see our combinators are on there. It splits them up, but just barely visible. Don't have much of that. We've got, you can see quite a bit of up and down with the assembling machines, but everything's pretty steady. And we're looking at, doesn't look like it got much over 400 kilowatts, and we can do 2 megawatts, so we're totally fine with the power. Production. Well, we had a bit of a spike in coal there, and that's where we hooked up the new, see it's spiking again here as we extended the line, because more of it is needed now, because there's more belt to fill. The combinators, regulate it based on how full the belt is. More belt means more coal needed. But this is when we first set up the east coal field, and then you can see a remarkably consistent line, which is interesting. And then you can see also production of everything sort of dived right there towards the end. And I think that's because I had everything I needed in a lot of areas, and I was building this. So that's all going on. We're still building about 40 or so different items every hour in some quantity. The quantities of the main things have remained pretty stable. A little more coal overall, but not a huge amount. Yeah, and you can see that's running full tilt, but that'll settle itself out as we would expect. Jumping back into our mini map for a bit here, just to look at some resource stuff. Still got, well, I'm not successfully, there we go, scrolling the map. Still got 1.8 million out here, not worried about that. You can see the coal is down to 14k, that's about 10k lost there. So by the end of this session, that's going to be almost gone. And the sapphirite is 356. So we're chewing through, a few thousand of that per hour. Probably still got 50 to 100 hours of it left. Not really an immediate concern, but that's sort of, it's becoming like a mid-range concern with not having anyone nearby still. Again, that little bit down there, not really going to help us. Now my next goal, research-wise, and sort of the next goal for the factory, was to get into steam power. And the main reason for that is just, we're going to be expanding, we're going to be needing more and more power. Let's get it done with as little coal as we can. Now, we have plenty of coal right now, but let's not burn through it any faster than we have to. So this is the first steam power, but I actually wanted to get that and this one, which is the first upgrade. And the reason is that you can see we got an efficiency of 60% on the boilers there. It's only 50% for those. And so it's currently 40.5% with the current turbine. So we boosted to 60%. That's like a 50% increase, or we're going to be using 2/3 as much coal as we are now, or however you want to look at that. The thing about this is, though, and there are additional levels, but we need like green vials, so that's not going to happen. Red vials, red sacrificial electromagnets needed here. But you can see it's not cheap. The original, like the first steam engine, needs 24 electric motors and a couple other things, and then this needs a whole bunch of steel. And then the boiler needs some steel as well. So it's not cheap to set up, but once it's up, it's much more effective than what we have. And the expensiveness of that, we can thank the realistic power mod for that, which is interesting, because it basically says, okay, when you want to go to steam power, the cost for that point in the game is going to be fairly significant. It's not prohibitive. It just, it's going to take a bit of doing to get there. So that was the thing I really wanted to push towards, is that, I want steam power as the next big project. I had to wait for some research to happen, and actually at the point of this particular save file, it's already completed, but I was doing some things with the circuit network to hook up, some final bits. And one of the things I want to do was fix this whole issue. Now, initially, this assembler was over here, the furnace was over here. I tried reversing them. Both of them ended up with the same problem, because I was emptying out into this belt, and then this inserter grabs stuff, and it's going to grab, like this is meant to be a buffer chest. So, I was either going to have to put a filter inserter in somewhere or find another way to route things. Because if it put rubber out here, then it was putting that in the chest. If it put resin out here, it was putting that in the chest. It was gumming up the whole system. And I'm sure there's a much more elegant way to do it. I mean, I could have put a filter inserter in. I just didn't really feel like going through the effort of getting one built. So what I did is I put, this extra line up here. So now the resin goes here and the rubber goes here. And this will stop outputting. You can see when it's reached a certain limit, in this case 50. B signal contains 50 of various things, and I want the same amount of rubber. So, this will take some of it out, and then once it reaches enough resin, then it'll start putting all of its resin over into the rubber furnace, and, away we go. And then I also wired the box up because I wanted to limit the greenhouse, because now I've got the greenhouse running. I've got all of this stuff out here. This is running automatically, and that's set to 200, or not 200, I think it's 350. What I want to do is have almost a full stack, because before anything gets by this, it's going to have to fill up a stack on this chest, and this chest is limited. So that'll be 200, and then it'll put another 150 back at central storage, and then the greenhouse will shut down. So I'm trying to create, again, a control system where I've got the right amount of everything, or a decent amount of everything. It doesn't have to be precise, coming through. So this is what I ended up doing with this area. Before I ran down here and messed with this, I also hooked up the copper, which was no big deal. Generally speaking, we're producing about as much copper as we need with the one drill, but I did do something else. I just hooked up the network and said, look, if it gets over 200, stop producing it. And eventually that did happen. So it's kind of superfluous, but it did help out. And I wanted to have everything hooked up smart, even if I don't really need it all the time. the less things I'm doing, the better. So this, of course, is what I've called the solder area. It's, of course, it produces lead and tin as well, but lead is only being used right now in solder. And then this is producing tin, not just for solder, but also for that's the tin furnace for everything else that we need it way back up at central storage. But there's a problem here. See, I've brought the red wire down here. I got more red wires to use. I'm all set up to hook things in here, but the reason I didn't mess with this before is that this setup really is not conducive to doing it. If we try hooking up more red wires, like let's say I want to output rubite when, for the lead, when there's lead plates in there. Well, or stop when there's no lead plates in there. The problem is I can't, these furnaces don't accept, like I can't hook up circuit networks to them. So there's no way to tell if it needs more, the way that this is right now. So I have no way to use the circuit network. I had to sort of revamp this whole setup. And it ended up being a little bit more interesting than I expected. So here's what we ended up with. And oh my goodness, what is all this mess? Well, let's just sort of start over here. I've got chests here that are wired. And the idea behind these is, okay, if we can't hook up to the furnaces themselves, we'll extend this way. We're a little bit into this field, which I didn't want. But I've got this rock here, which I can't get rid of in any lazy bastard type of way. I could just, chop it. But again, that's violating the spirit of the playthrough. We've got this moved over here, so we empty the iron. That's not iron, that's tin. Get your metals right. So we empty the tin into here, and then that's trapped, and it says, okay, I've got this much tin, so we can use that to know when to shut things off. Same thing here for the lead. So that was the start of things. And so I'm adding this tin to the tin that's at the main thing, the main central storage. And then if the tin's less than a certain amount, output Q is 1. And if the solder's less than another amount, in this case 50, output Q is 1. So the idea is if we get anything out on the Q signal, in other words, either one of these conditions is true, then we need more bobmonium. And that goes all the way up like you can see from here, all the way up there to the bobmonium. So that was a bit of a long wiring project, but not too far. A couple dozen of them did it. And so that tells that drill whether to produce more or not. Okay. Now we are still getting some from this one over here, but not a lot. And this one is now wired up to the lead. So it says produce more if we don't have enough here. Now that's, perhaps I should have wired it up to this and just said, look, if this is out, produce more. But I eventually wanted it to be hooked up to lead anyway, and it's not producing very much very fast. Now this is something I hadn't done before, which I thought was interesting. First of all, we've got more conditions here. If there's no rubite, and if there's enough lead. And if both conditions are satisfied, then we'll get more rubite. In other words, if there's not enough lead in here, and there's none on the belt. And the none on the belt is important because if we just let this run, like the inserter will output rubite faster than it can smelt in here, because this consumes 3, but it only consumes it every 7 seconds. And this is going to output more than 3 every 7 seconds. So eventually it overwhelms this, rubite gets by and goes past where I want it to be. And I use the same readers to inform this thing. Now, what this is doing is it's getting rid of all of the crushed stone. I've added a filter inserter to make sure all the crushed stone goes over here. And of course, that whole thing is only going to be necessary as long as we have like this backlog. But you can see it's almost 2,000 of it, so this backlog is going to last a while. And we're gradually getting rid of the crushed stone that was with it. So why am I not just outputting crushed stone constantly? Well, the reason for that is, up at central storage, if I just bombard this line with constant stone to that degree, then it will, not do anything. Like, it'll not do anything is not the right phraseology. It'll back up the system so that loop up there, and eventually it goes up to the copper loop. It's going to be clogged with stone. We're going to have a big mess all over the place, and I don't want that. And you can see the lights turning on and off to indicate what I've got going on here. So what I did was, with these belt readers, you can see these are in hold, not pulse. I used pulse before. Hold counts it, as it says, continuously as long as the items are on the belt. So there has to be no stone and no rubite on either one of these belt sections, trapping each one right next to each other. So if there's any stone on either place, it outputs the one, wait for it to go through, waits for it to go through, then comes back on. You can see the stone doing that. So what we've got is we've got a steady flow that is enough that can be handled, but not so much that it'll overwhelm the system. And I was pretty happy with myself when I figured this out. It ended up being a little more convoluted than I wanted, but it works, and I like the this solution here with the belt readers. I thought that was, at least by my standards, it was pretty elegant. Now this here, and ignore this whole iron mess, I took care of that fairly quickly, but this here is a tangled mess of wires now, obviously. Stuff going everywhere. What on earth am I doing? Well, what was happening is I've got the system set up in terms of when to produce iron. But how do I know when to take more iron into here? So what I had been doing is just setting the filters manually, and I pretty much always want the steel and carbon ones on. There's no reason, like I don't need steel or carbon anywhere else. Which, now that I think about it, means I need to change how these deciders read. But the iron was different, because sometimes, if the iron is needed in here, less than 300, I want to pull it in. But if it's not, then I want it to go around, and I've got a faulty, what I end up needing to do here, just to show it, I have a faulty wire here. And it's basically screwing up the count. So if I take that off, okay, there we go. Now it's fixed. Now it's going to start unloading. And I've got all this stuff on here, but it's just going around. It's not going where. It's making a bit of a mess. I added a couple more inserters to speed this up. It cleared out the iron, and, we got everything situated. Anyway, back to the filter inserter. So what I need to do is find a way to dynamically change the filters on the filter inserter, like what it's actually going to grab based on what was needed. So that's the steel one. That's the iron one, which is the key one. If iron's less than 300, it'll output it. So let's say I take 100 of the iron out of here, and all of a sudden that flips on, and it's going to fill it until it reaches 300. I put it back in, boom, and it shuts off. So what this does is that it outputs just the iron signal, and I've got the green wires so it doesn't interfere with everything else, and they're running into the filter inserter. So this looks like a big mess, and in fact it is a big mess. Like, there's no room to walk hardly or do, I can get between things, but it's just, there's nothing to call it other than a big mess. But doggone it, it works. So, and I didn't even realize this until I was recording this video, but I think clearly what I want to do is always have the steel go. So, like, I might put something like, something stupid like that signal, which has nothing. If that equals 0, which it's always going to equal 0, then output steel. Because any steel that comes down here, I'm going to want to go in here. There's nowhere else for it to go. And I'm going to want to do the same thing with carbon. That way, you don't have it shutting off while there's still 1 or 2 steel on the belt. and not loading it in, and that just occupies belt space and goes around and around and around and around and around. So that I definitely want to do. And so there's sometimes when I do something and I don't see the hidden flaw in the system until later, and that just happened to occur to me right now. So I need to make a note to do that when I resume the game. So I did have quite a bit of time left after I'd set this up, and once I reached this point of having the deciders, tell the filter inserter what to do, that was sort of the final thing. Everything is running on, a smart or self-regulated control. Everything's getting something from my fabulous little control center here, which is about half full, a little more than half full, with different signals that it's sending out all over the place. And some of them are using multiple times. Like I'm using the B equals 50. I'm using that for like 3 things. I'm using this for like 2 or 3 things. But they're telling everything what to make. So as I pull things and build various things, it sort of regulates itself. Now, then what I needed to start building the steam power. And I got going on that. I did end up turning another one of these into steel for a while, until I started running low on iron, and then I had to switch it back to iron. So I did a little bit of, I had to tweak that a little bit, and again, I can't tell the circuit network to hook up to the furnace, so I can't make it change any of that automatically. But, there was a lot of stuff to do, a lot of materials needed, and for the most part, like I wanted to just get the materials that I needed, but a lot of it was just I needed a bunch of steel and other things for the steam engines and the boiler themselves. The rest of it, not a big deal. Like we go over here to my transport belts, and that's not doing anything because I've got all the transport belts I need. A little bit of, inserters and electrical poles and everything else, but not a whole lot that was needed. And what I wanted to do was set up that power on its own grid. I want to have its own coal supply. So eventually I'm going to want to put the mines up here and run and have it somewhere in this area where the actual steam power is generated. It's got to be near water, or it's best for it to be near water. Now I could just run the pipes out this way too, but I'd rather keep it near the water, and because the water is an inexhaustible resource, so keep it there, and wherever the coal moves, the coal comes here. So I want to have the coal on its own thing, so that like if I run out of coal like for this line, it's not going to destroy my power network. So that the coal for the rest of the factory is completely independent from the coal for the power. The steam power plant that I'm going to want to build. And I got the boiler done, but just barely. And I still got both of the steam engines to build, which are quite resource intensive. And I was working on stuff for those. Needed more nanotubes. You always need more nanotubes. I put up some more wall sections, but there was nothing dramatic sort of that happened in the last half an hour. So finishing up the steam power, definitely going to be a big thing for the next episode. And as you can see, it's churning away here. I got to about 270 wall sections and put those up. But then once I get the steam power going, from there, there's really nothing stopping me from sort of trying to do more expansion things and work my way further towards the minibus. So that's where we're going to go with the next episode, the next couple hours of playtime on the Factorio way. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll be back soon with that, and hopefully before too long.